The forest had always been quiet after sunset. That was why Joe Austen came here, whenever life became too heavy. At 23, Joe's world revolved around overdue bills, endless work, and an old wooden cabin that seemed to creak louder every winter. He repaired farm equipment during the day, took online freelance jobs at night, and still barely had enough money to keep the lights on. People often said hard work always paid off. Joe was still waiting. That evening, he sat on a fallen log, listening to the wind move through the trees. For the first time in weeks, there were no phone calls, no emails, no reminders that another payment was due. Then the sky split open. A brilliant silver streak tore across the evening sky, followed by a deep rumble that shook the ground beneath his boots. Joe jumped to his feet. What on earth? The object disappeared beyond the hills. Seconds later, a distant crash echoed through the forest. Every instinct told him to stay away. Instead, he grabbed his flashlight and ran. Smoke drifted between the trees. Branches snapped beneath Joe's boots as he pushed deeper into the woods. When he reached a clearing, he froze. Half buried in the earth was a strange craft unlike anything he had ever imagined. Its smooth metallic surface shimmered with faint blue patterns that pulsed like a heartbeat. There were no wings, no windows, no visible engines. The air smelled strangely fresh, almost like rain after a storm. Joe took one cautious step forward. A section of the craft slid open with a soft hiss. No one came out. "Hello," Joe called. Silence. He waited another minute before deciding not to get closer. "If someone's hurt, they'll need help," he muttered. Just then, a weak electronic chirp echoed from inside the ship before fading into silence. Whatever had landed here, it was damaged. Joe pulled out his phone. No signal. Seriously? The forest had never seemed so isolated. He looked around once more, hoping to see survivors. Nothing. Finally, deciding there was little he could do alone, Joe turned toward home. He had taken only a few steps when he heard laughter. Children. He frowned. At this hour? The sound came from deeper in the forest. He followed it carefully. The laughter suddenly stopped. "Hello," Joe called. No answer. Then 3 tiny figures peeked from behind enormous ferns. Joe blinked. They weren't human. The smallest one had bright emerald skin, enormous golden eyes, and ears that curved gently backward. The older 2 looked similar, though their skin shimmered faintly beneath the moonlight. All 3 stared at Joe with equal parts curiosity and fear. For several long seconds, nobody moved. Joe slowly raised both hands. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you." The oldest child stepped protectively in front of the younger 2. A faint glow appeared around the child's hands. Joe immediately stopped walking. "Fair enough," he whispered. "I'd probably do the same." The youngest suddenly sneezed. Tiny sparkling lights burst into the air like glowing fireflies. Joe couldn't help smiling. "Well, that's definitely new." The smallest child blinked, then giggled. The tension eased ever so slightly. Joe carefully reached into his backpack. "I've got something." He pulled out an apple. The children watched every movement. Joe placed the apple on a nearby rock before backing away. No tricks. The youngest cautiously approached. He sniffed it, then took a tiny bite. His eyes widened. Within seconds, all 3 were sharing the apple, smiling for the first time. Joe laughed quietly. "I guess apples are universal." The oldest child pointed toward the dark forest, speaking rapidly in a musical language Joe couldn't understand. Joe looked where the child pointed. "Your parents." The child nodded anxiously. "You got separated?" Another nod. Joe sighed. "Okay, first things first." He looked toward the crashed ship hidden beyond the trees. "If your parents survived, they'll be looking for you." The children seemed relieved that he understood. Then thunder rolled overhead. Rain began falling. Within moments, it became a downpour. The youngest started shivering. Joe removed his jacket and gently wrapped it around the tiny alien. "Come on," he said. "We're getting out of the rain." The 3 children exchanged uncertain glances. Trusting a stranger was dangerous, but staying alone in the storm was worse. One by one, they followed the human. Morning sunlight spilled through the cabin windows, replacing the stormy darkness of the previous night with warmth. Joe woke to the smell of fresh bread. He frowned. "I don't remember baking anything." He stepped into the kitchen and froze. The 3 alien children stood on wooden stools, completely focused on making breakfast. The youngest stirred a bowl with both hands while humming a cheerful tune. The middle child carefully arranged fruit on old ceramic plates. The oldest examined Joe's worn coffee maker with intense concentration before pressing a glowing fingertip against it. The machine coughed once. Then it roared back to life. Joe stared. I spent 3 weeks trying to fix that. The oldest smiled proudly. You fixed it. The child nodded enthusiastically. Joe laughed for the first time in months. I guess I owe you breakfast. The children exchanged excited looks. Although they still couldn't understand each other's language, smiles proved to be a language of their own. Over the next few days, an unexpected routine formed. Joe worked around the cabin while the children followed him everywhere. When he chopped firewood, the oldest quietly stacked every log before he could lift another. When weeds filled the garden, tiny glowing vines from the middle child's fingertips gently pulled them from the soil without damaging a single vegetable. The youngest discovered that injured birds and squirrels calmed instantly whenever he softly touched them. You 3 are unbelievable, Joe said one afternoon. The youngest tilted his head. Joe smiled. I mean, you're amazing. The little alien copied the last word as best he could. Ma zing. Joe laughed. Close enough. Every day, they learned a little more of each other's language. Joe pointed to himself. Joe. The children repeated together. Joe. Then the oldest touched his own chest. Kieran. The middle child smiled. Luma. Finally, the youngest bounced excitedly. Pico. Joe grinned. Nice to officially meet you. For the first time since the crash, the children no longer looked frightened. They looked happy. Miles away, hidden beneath towering trees, 2 exhausted figures searched the forest. Vora knelt beside a tiny footprint pressed into soft earth. They're alive, she whispered. Kellen crouched beside her. How can you be certain? She closed her eyes. Their life sign bond is faint, but stronger than yesterday. Relief washed over both parents. They found shelter, Kellen said. Vora looked toward the distant mountains. No, they found someone. Back in town, trouble quietly began. A local hunter named Rick parked his truck near the forest after hearing strange noises during the storm. He expected to find a fallen tree. Instead, he caught a glimpse of a small blue child racing between the bushes. Rick blinked. What was that? Before he could move closer, Pico disappeared behind a hill. Rick hurried after him. Nothing. Only tiny footprints leading toward Joe's cabin. Rick raised his camera. Click. One blurry photograph. One impossible image. He drove straight back to town. That evening, Joe noticed something different. A dusty pickup truck rolled slowly past his cabin. Then it came back. And passed again. Joe quietly closed the curtains. The children immediately sensed his concern. What is it? He whispered. Outside, the truck finally stopped. A car door opened. Footsteps crunched across the gravel. Someone knocked. 3 slow knocks. Joe looked at the children. Stay upstairs. Without making a sound, they disappeared. Joe opened the door only a few inches. Rick stood outside holding a camera. I think we need to talk. Joe's smile faded. What about? Rick glanced toward the cabin windows. I think you're hiding someone. Joe's heartbeat quickened. For the first time, protecting the children wasn't just about keeping a promise. It meant standing between them and the entire world. The flashing red and blue lights appeared just before sunrise. Joe stood behind the living room curtain, his jaw tightening as 3 police vehicles stopped at the end of the dirt road leading to his cabin. More cars followed. A news van. Then another. Within minutes, reporters were setting up cameras. Someone had talked. Rick. Joe took a slow breath before turning toward the 3 alien children. Kieran immediately understood. His golden eyes narrowed. They found us, Joe whispered. Pico climbed into Joe's arms without hesitation. For the first time since they met, the little alien wasn't smiling. Outside, a loudspeaker crackled to life. Joe Austin, we know you're inside. Please come out peacefully. Joe closed his eyes. They think I'm the danger. Luma gently tugged on his sleeve and pointed toward the back door. A hidden trail. Joe nodded. Good idea. Keeping low, the 4 slipped out through the rear of the cabin and disappeared into the forest moments before officers entered the front yard. The woods had become their home over the past week. Joe knew every narrow trail, every fallen tree, every stream that cut through the hills. Instead of running blindly, he led the children through places vehicles couldn't reach. Behind them, helicopters circled overhead. They're searching everywhere, Joe said. Kieran looked at the sky, then slowly raised his hand. A faint ripple of shimmering light spread through the trees. The helicopter passed directly overhead. Without slowing, Joe blinked. They can't see us? Kieran smiled and nodded. A camouflage field. Joe whispered in amazement. You've been able to do that all this time? The young alien lowered his head. He hadn't used it before because it required too much energy. Now there was no choice. Several miles away, Vora suddenly stopped running. Kellen. He looked at her. They're close. How close? She closed her eyes. The bond is stronger than ever. The first police sirens echoed through the forest just as the sun began to rise. Joe looked through the cracked window of his cabin. Police vehicles blocked the dirt road. News vans rolled in behind them, satellite dishes rising toward the sky. Reporters rushed forward with cameras while officers surrounded the property. Someone had revealed the truth. Joe took a slow breath. So they found us. The three alien children gathered beside him. For the first time since they had met, none of them smiled. A loudspeaker crackled outside. Joe Austin, we know you're inside. Come out peacefully. No one has to get hurt. Joe looked down at Kieran, Luma, and Pico. They don't understand, he whispered. They think I'm hiding you. Pico wrapped both tiny arms around Joe's leg. Joe gently ruffled his hair. I made you a promise. I'm getting you home. Kieran quietly pointed toward the back door. The hidden forest trail. Joe nodded. Let's go. Moments before officers entered the front yard, the four disappeared into the woods. The forest had become familiar during the past week. Joe knew every narrow path, every stream, and every fallen tree. Helicopters circled overhead. Search teams spread through the valley. They're everywhere, Joe said. Kieran stepped forward and closed his eyes. Blue light spread from his fingertips. A transparent camouflage field shimmered around them before blending perfectly with the forest. A helicopter flew directly overhead. Without slowing, Joe looked up in disbelief. They can't see us. Kieran smiled weakly. The ability had exhausted him. Joe knelt beside him. You saved us. The young alien simply answered. You, family. Joe smiled. Yeah, family. Hours later, they reached the clearing where the alien ship had crashed. Except, it was no longer broken. The massive spacecraft stood silently beneath the morning sun, its silver hull covered in flowing blue symbols. Suddenly, those symbols brightened. Everything was peaceful. The ship's entrance slowly opened. Two tall figures stepped forward. The children froze. Then all three shouted together. Mother! Father! They sprinted across the clearing. Vora fell to her knees, embracing all three children as tears streamed down her face. Kellen closed his eyes in relief before placing one trembling hand on each child's head. For several quiet moments, no one spoke. Joe stepped back, smiling. This reunion belonged to them. Then Pico suddenly broke away. He ran straight back to Joe and hugged him tightly. I'll miss you, Joe whispered. Kieran and Luma joined the hug without hesitation. Vora smiled through her tears. So this is the human our children never stopped talking about. Joe rubbed the back of his neck. I only gave them a place to stay. Kellen gently shook his head. No, you gave them something our civilization has slowly forgotten. Joe looked puzzled. What? Luma smiled. A home. Kieran added. He always ate after making sure we had enough. Pico laughed. He tucked us in every night. Vora looked toward Joe's small cabin in the distance. We crossed galaxies searching for knowledge. We mastered energy. We defeated disease. We built cities among the stars. Her voice softened, but somewhere along the journey, we forgot the meaning of simple kindness. Joe lowered his eyes. I only did what anyone should do. Kellen smiled. Not everyone would. Suddenly Pico tugged on his mother's sleeve. Mother, she looked down. Can we take Earth's round bread with cheese home? Joe laughed. You mean pizza? Pico nodded excitedly. And Joe's magic morning drink. Coffee, Joe corrected. Luma raised her hand. And pancakes. Vora laughed for the first time. I apologize. They have spoken about Earth's food every single day. Even Kellen smiled. It appears humanity's greatest export is breakfast. Everyone burst into laughter. The tension disappeared. Then Kellen became serious. What is it? Joe asked. It contains knowledge. Holograms surrounded him. Unlimited clean energy. Medical discoveries that could cure countless diseases. Agricultural technology capable of ending famine. Water purification systems for entire continents. Advanced materials that could rebuild cities sustainably. Joe stared in disbelief. Why trust me? Vora answered softly. Because you protected our children when no one was watching. Kellen continued. There is only one condition. Joe nodded. What is it? This knowledge must never belong to one man. It belongs to humanity. Joe smiled. I promise. Outside the protective energy dome, reporters watched every second in stunned silence. Then the alien ship transmitted one final message across every television camera, satellite, and mobile phone on Earth. Judge humanity not by its weapons, but by the man who protected our children without expecting anything in return. Silence spread across the world. Pico hugged Joe one last time. When I grow up, can I visit Earth again? Joe smiled through misty eyes. Only if you bring pizza. Pico giggled. Only if you make the coffee. The energy dome slowly faded. The ship rose into the sky. As it disappeared beyond the clouds, Joe realized his life had changed forever. Not because aliens had rewarded him, but because, in saving 3 frightened children, he had reminded 2 civilizations that the greatest force in the universe was neither power nor technology. It was compassion.